In 1972, God began telling a story on the grounds of Tuscarora. It's a story of God using many people to further his kingdom for his glory. The story begins a few years earlier when a small group of dedicated people decided to take a leap of faith seeking a location which could serve as a retreat facility for the Eastern District of the Church of the Lutheran Brethren. In February of 1970, the grounds of Tuscarora were visited for the first time.
My earliest memory of Tuscarora was actually before we bought Tuscarora. I came up there with my parents when I was a boy, and imagine Tuscarora, no gym, no auditorium, no Mountain View dorms, no anything, just the cabins around the pool.
I mean, I remember hearing about we were going to a new camp and getting all excited, but it was definitely a family tradition every summer coming to Tuscarora.
Ted Thompson was very much seeking a place for a Bible camp for the Church of Lutheran Brethren Eastern District. And as such, we found there was this property on the Delaware River. So he asked if I would go up with my dad and Ted Thompson and Stan Benson to look at this property, which we did. Property was beautiful.
My very first memory of Tuscarora is the weekend. I guess it was the founding or original board members or potential board members, I'm not exactly sure, where they were making plans about the purchase of Tuscarora. And so the families of the board members were invited to come along, and we stayed here over the weekend. And I remember the Red Lounge, which is now a very nice light and bright dining room, is where we stayed on the floor in sleeping bags. During the day, our dads were in meetings and our moms were checking out all of the facilities. And we just were kind of running around the grounds, looking at everything, checking into everything. And so it was just a great time to be together and enjoy that time.
And so, Tuscarora Inn was founded, and Fred Stoutland was named the first president of the board of directors. The early days were busy and costly.
When we were looking at it, one of the problems was where are we going to get the money to do all of this? And essentially they came up with a plan to have 3 places to generate the funds. One was for gifts, outright gifts from people. Secondly, to sell lots up on a hill to generate funds for part of the money. And the last part was a significant loan that came from the Church of the Lutheran Brethren.
In September of 1971, 600 people gathered to hear the vision for the conference center, and every lot of the Tuscarora village was sold.
But I do remember there were cars on every surface of the grass as far as the eye could see. Everyone came and really believed in the beginning of this ministry.
The village played a big part in getting the ministry started back in the day in terms of raising the funds necessary to make the down payment to get things started here.
In the early days, Tuscarora had many directors. In the first 4 years, Tuscarora was led by Reverend Rollin Rognes, Reverend Ted Thompson, and Albert Nesland, who began at Tuscarora as a cook.
Around 74, 75, there was a need to have a new managing director to take over. And that was when my father was reaching out to Herb and other people were. And in fact, he had seen an ad and at the same time, and they actually came down, interviewed, and
in 1975, Herb Jacobsen accepted the call to lead Tuscarora, a position he would hold for the next 30 years.
Instead of working for a large corporation, we had the privilege of working with this ministry for 30 years. The person who set the chain of events in motion that led to our coming here was Olga Reby. Many of you know her. She has since passed away. When our family moved to Erie, Pennsylvania, she told us she would make sure we stayed connected with the Church of Lutheran Brethren, and so said and assured us that she would send us the Faith and Fellowship magazine, which is the periodical of the Church of the Lutheran Brethren. Through information in that magazine, we started on our journey that led us here.
You know, Herb Jacobsen, the director for many years, I grew up with his kids, and we worked a lot there together. And every time we would sneak out at night, gonna do something, leave the room, go around the corner, there's Herb, without doubt. And God gave him a certain ability to know exactly where he needed to be.
The early success of Tuscarora would not have been possible if not for the members of the board going above and beyond what could be expected.
You know, in the earliest days, board members were all called upon to find the volunteers and bring them here and serve on the weekends and make some beds and, you know, serve some meals and all of that.
We would bring the kids up on Friday night, go back on Sunday.
Yeah. And we had a fairly large youth group in the church that we went to in Staten Island, and we'd bring kids up to serve the tables and to do this and do that.
My mom would call around and find out who was available to come, and then on Friday after school, she'd pick us up at school, and then we'd go around picking up other kids that were going to work and filled up the station wagon, and off we went to Pennsylvania.
I guess appreciated my parents' involvement through the years and didn't realize how much work that was to supply all the help for the weekends and then come home and go to work. Was pretty amazing.
The service of these men and women has inspired generations of dedicated service. Before guests could begin arriving, a few buildings had to be constructed and modifications to existing buildings needed to be made. From 1972 to 1975, a large red and white tent was used as the main meeting area.
You know, hundreds of people were always there for all these meetings, and I always found that to be pretty amazing.
You know, meeting in a tent and all was nice, but it was difficult because you didn't have the ability to have the meetings in the bad weather or in the winter or so forth and so on.
Through the generous donation of skills, time, and materials from Ulla B. Olsen, an auditorium was dedicated in 1976, which would later be named in his memory.
And he gave and gave and gave.
He did.
He was the most generous of people. Never with wanting his name or.
Right.
I don't think he ever
And he
approved
said
that his name went over
he
the
never-
gym until he was gone.
Right.
One of the things my dad didn't want to put his name on the building, his insistence was two things. One is that he had this picture that was back in Hillside that had been taken down and not being used. And it was a picture of a shepherd going out after the lost sheep. And so that became an important part that he wanted to have in that building. And after that, he said, I want the words, "To God be the glory," to be a central part of this building, so that people, when they come, they could be brought to the claims of Christ and come into a personal salvation for each person. And that was his goal.
In the following years, as churches and groups visited Tuscarora, the ministry grew.
Coming from Brooklyn, it was like you're out in the country. You're out in the sticks. You can't walk to a store. You were taking out of your normal, everyday, busy lifestyle, and you were able to just come and meet your friends here that you would only see from other churches. You would also be able to participate in the sessions where you would get to worship and not have any other distractions. But it was definitely a huge outreach to me.
In 1976, Radar Senum became the second president of the board of directors and oversaw a period of time where the conference center expanded its facilities. Prior to hosting the Church of the Lutheran Brethren's annual convention for the very first time, a building suite was purchased from Bedminster, New Jersey, and was dismantled and reassembled on the grounds piece by piece to serve as the snack shop and bookstore.
So my dad and Tom Sandus took that entire building down piece by piece and marked each part, and it became like a jigsaw puzzle. And he put the whole thing together, and that is currently the snack bar and the bookstore that has existed for almost 50 years.
The first management team at Tuscarora began to form with the arrival of John and Beth Erickson, John and Lynn Svensson, and Ken and Elsie Stoutland a few years later. John and Lynn Svensson have continued to serve the ministry of Tuscarora ever since. New guest rooms were needed, and so the Reby building was completed in 1976, and the Hillside Manor was completed in 1980.
Radar Senum was significant in his involvement in this place. He started the Reby building, and he went and moved over to the Hillside Manor, which was built also by Radar.
These are things that enhance the use of Tuscarora Inn, because they all have uses that were basically their own, but they all helped each other.